What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Wing and Tail Boys podcast, your Northeast hunting and fishing destination. I'm Chris,
And I'm Angelo.
and we're your hosts. Join us as we navigate the woods and waters of the Northeast, sharing our passion for the outdoors.
Whether it's land management, outdoor recreation, hunting, or fishing, we're going to cover it all. With 40 plus years of experience in the Northeast, we'll provide insights, tips, and stories to help you make the most of your adventures and help you experience the wild.
So, tune in, grab your gear, and let's hit the woods together. And always remember, success is just a commitment away.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Wing and Tail Boys podcast. I'm Angelo.
I'm Chris.
And today we are joined by a special guest. Brian Melvin is joining us. Just recently harvested the New Jersey record black bear, and he's here to tell his story. Brian, how you doing?
Doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's just get right into it then. Tell us a little bit about your background, kind of how you grew up, how you got into hunting, and kind of just give us a little bit about you first.
So, grew up in New Jersey, grew up in Essex County. Do not come from a hunting family, believe it or not. I got into hunting from my fifth grade gym teacher, which took me out on a whole bunch of kids out on an outdoor program, and got into bird hunting with him and his dogs at about 9 and 10 years old, and that was kind of my gateway drug, if you will. From that point forward, I got really heavy into bird hunting until about my mid to early 20s, when I picked up a bow and really started chasing whitetails, and then transitioned into a lot of waterfowl, and then slowly transitioned to everything else, going out west chasing elk, and of course obviously into the bear hunting. So it's been a progression, but there's not too much I don't chase at this point. But I did not come from a hunting family. It was a learn on the run and try and figure it out yourself kind of thing.
Well, I mean, Christopher and I both come from a hunting family. So having someone join us who hasn't come from a hunting family, just touch on that for a second. Did you even have like an uncle or anyone that hunted at all that once you started hunting, you were able to connect with? Or, what
No.
was their response like when you said, hey, listen, this is something I want to pursue, and started doing it? I mean, if you're traveling out west and doing something, it sounds like you really kind of dove into it. So, talk
I
a little bit
did.
about like what that interaction might have been like.
Sure. Yeah. When I first started to dive into it, I did not have anybody. There's no one in my family. Everybody plays golf and sports. I played sports in college, but it really took everyone by surprise, and I didn't have really anyone to bounce things off of. I kind of had to learn everything on my own. I did eventually meet people that helped mentor me and teach me, as I try to do to a lot of other people at this point in my life. But in regards to family and friends at that point, I had nobody. I've pulled a lot of my friends into it now. We have a great crew, then we run around and chase things together. But growing up, there was absolutely nobody to bounce this off of. It was kind of just figure it out on your own, or find somebody that might show you. And I that's why I go out of my way now to help out with the children programs and any kind of program I can to help a new hunter out, because I was that person. I didn't have anybody at home. I didn't have anybody on the speed dial to bounce ideas off of, or get at new ideas, or figure out things. It was kind of figure it on your own and just try and get it done.
So was there anywhere along that journey that you went to or you could rely on to find information, or so like new information to try out? Like, were you watching like the Outdoor Channel? Were you listening to podcasts at the time, videos? Like, what was your main method to try to teach yourself, basically?
So yeah, at the time, I mean, podcasts, at least in my world, are kind of relatively new. Um, 10, 15, 20 years ago, there was no podcast. So it was a lot of Outdoor Channel. It was a lot of reading different magazines and trying out different things, and a lot of trial and error, a lot of mistakes. I mean, if anybody's been telling you they've been bow hunting and they haven't missed, they're just lying, or they're not bow hunting long enough, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. But yeah, a lot of mistakes and a lot of trial and error, a lot of trying to reach out to people that I've met on social media and try and pick their brains, which really was a big help for me. It got me into a lot of groups and a lot of training groups with I do a lot with training dogs, and we do a lot of competitions up and down the East Coast. That group of people really opened up the door for me for a lot of different resources throughout the hunting community. But yeah, it was pretty much find the right people to ask the questions to, see what mistakes I can make and learn, and try and put the pieces together.
Okay. Now, Angelo, I see Angelo smirking. And I think I know why, and I'm just going to touch on this, and we're definitely going to bring it up in like a future podcast. But you said dog training. I have a
Yeah,
short hair that I trained in NAVDA, ran in like hunting trials.
great.
What kind of dogs do you train, and what kind of like circuit do you run it?
So I'm a big waterfowl hunter, like big time. Let's like predominantly most of what I do actually.
Okay,
And so I have a black lab. I've had a couple labs. We do all the AKC tests. We do the NARA tests. We do the HRC tests, which are all the hunt tests. I haven't dived into the field trial game because most of my guys are all hunters
sure.
first. But yeah, we're pretty heavy into the hunt test game up and down the coast. I got a whole crew of guys that we train with a couple times a week here up in North New Jersey. So if I turn the computer around, you'd see a wall of ribbons over there from the pups, accomplishments over the years. But yeah, it's an addiction. If you know the game, you know how much fun it is and how a blast we have.
And how addicting it is. And
Yeah,
spoiler alert, Angelo and I have been in conversations. One of the things we want to do here is kind of like create different like video series of sorts. And one of them that I've really wanted to get into is the dog training and how to, take a dog from a puppy and turn him into a hunting companion, or,
right.
however far you want to take it. So if we could get you back for that stuff, that would be
Absolutely.
awesome.
That'd
That'd
be
be
great.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of community we're looking to build here. I mean, as I told you, we're a small channel looking to grow as well. We're here on the Sportsman's Empire podcast network. We're representing the Northeast, so New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and we're looking to grow as much as we can. Yeah, and I want to touch everybody, but we have a couple people in a couple different states, but we also have a lot of people doing the same things. So
Yeah.
as much as we can diversify and kind of talk to like-minded people who are doing different things in the hunting realm or outdoor realm,
Mhm.
the better. And we want to give a community that people who may not have the type of people around them that they can rely on to support them when they either shoot their deer or need information. We want to be there to be able to support those people, and that's what we're looking to do: is grow a community to um, not only just connect with other hunters, but to help people who might be new to hunting and show them that, like you said, if a bow hunter said that he's never missed, he's lying, right? Because we've all been there, right? But not everybody shows the failures. Everybody's so addicted to showing the successes.
Yep.
But we want to focus on the entire aspect. So it doesn't matter what happens in our hunt. We're going to show it. We're
Great.
doing a series that I just started filming about skinning and tanning a hide. Is it something that the average guy really even wants to waste his time on? How hard is it to do? How easy is making a Euro mount? And some of these things that people might be interested and curious to kind of keep them
Hmm.
busy and keep them occupied while doing something that's productive. And just looking for other people who are out there who are trying to do the same things and give honest opinions and honest answers to some questions that they have.
That's great.
Um, Building on that, you said you started off waterfowl hunting, upland bird hunting, and then you
Mhm.
progressed into deer hunting. That was the next phase of it. So
Yep.
Christopher and I are predominantly big game deer hunters. That's kind
Okay.
of what our family grew up doing. We've done some upland bird hunting in New Jersey, where we're from. They have a stocking program where they stock the woods in different areas for us. But mainly we focus on deer hunting. How has your deer hunting career been for you so far? What have been your standards and tactics in the deer hunting woods?
Deer hunting's been pretty good. I've dropped some. I mean, according to my standards, some decent deer. I'm pretty picky at this point. I've probably taken, I don't know the exact number, but it's over 100 deer with the bow.
Wow.
Um, but pretty. I started doing some filming probably about 7 or 8 years ago. I got dabbled into it, and then over the last 5 6 years, really started getting heavy with it. And that kind of progressed into make it a little bit more challenging and really focus on some real mature animals. So you might see a couple behind me. I got a room down here with a few good ones, all Jersey, all bow, pretty much. I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but I'm lucky enough to hunt some good areas in New Jersey that have some good genetics and some good age class that some guys probably either going to say that I'm lying or whatnot, but we're not shooting 130s and so forth. We're passing on the 3 and 4 year olds. We're looking for 140, 150 class 5-year-olds, pretty much standard at this point. Not to say there's anything wrong with shooting smaller bucks. That's awesome. I'm all for it. I'd film anybody that wants to go for it, but just asking where I'm at in my journey at this point in life. I'm chasing that more, a little bit more mature animal. But I think the sport itself has taught me an incredible amount about just woodsmanship itself. Starting off as a bird hunter was a blessing because it got me in the woods and really opened the door for me. But once I picked up the bow, I would say that really that was a big change in how I approached hunting as a whole. Just the details and the minute little things that you got to pay attention to be successful on, especially on mature animals, which then parlayed into chasing larger animals, either out west like elk or this bear that has landed me on this show. That animal was by far the hardest animal that I've ever tried to catch up with. He was incredibly smart. Big bucks are smart, just a little different.
Yeah, and I'm in the same position in my journey now. This is the first year that my family has some property in upstate New York. We have like 100-ish acres, and then we hunt public land in Jersey, public land in Pennsylvania. And this year is like it's the fourth year we have the property, and it's the first year where we've really been able to like hone in on this one buck. And we had him patterned, and we had the shot, first weekend of the season, and someone missed him. So now I'm starting to realize, we've consumed all of this content in the past that says when you start targeting one deer, you see less deer, simply because of the places where you need to go to sit to hunt these. And I would love to dive into these topics, the more specifically, later on down the road. But I'm starting to see that that's true, and I kind of toted myself for being really good at finding deer, just getting in the woods and finding deer, going in, sitting down, finding deer, whether that's doe, buck, young, old, whatever. And now I'm getting humbled as hell because this year I'm out, and it's just bust after bust after bust this year. And I'm like just missing him. He shows up the day before, the day late, the day after, so I'm starting to feel lonely out there a little bit, but it's fun in its own way.
It is. And to add a little something that you just said about, seeing less deer, and there's another proponent that I feel that is some people don't realize until they start chasing older deer, is I hunt a lot less than I scout. I'm scouting and setting up and paying attention to the nuances and the details probably 90% of the time, and I'm hunting 10% of the time. My sits are a lot less. They're more precise, they're more calculated, instead of just getting out and trying to, kill a deer. If we're going after, like you said, going after a specific buck in a specific area, things have to be right. Wind has to be right, pressure has to be right, temperature has to be right. How the deer are moving in that area, what the mass crop is doing, all that stuff has to be right for that deer to move properly.
Right. Now, last question I have on this, and then we'll proceed. But my biggest thing is, especially being new to this area, I just moved to Pennsylvania back in June. So the biggest thing for me is I know I need to scout. Like, we have this wicked cold front coming, and I want to go out tomorrow, the day before the cold front, and I want to do some scouting and set up for Thursday when it drops 20 degrees. It's going to be awesome. But like, I always have this fear of, do I go in early and scout and leave my scent behind, or do I not give a shit and just keep pushing on and do what I have to do to find the sign? So what if you could just quickly touch on like how you feel about that? Do you really worry about scent? Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I definitely play the scent game. I don't two-part answer. The scent game is huge, especially for older animals in general, right? Playing the wind, playing the scent is definitely key. I have tried every scent product on the market, from all the expensive machines you can buy to every spray you can buy. I've tried them all. And I'm down to using almost nothing. Just keeping my clothes clean and playing the wind, because I have figured out you're just not going to beat them. The bears are harder than the deer, but we'll get into that.
Sure.
The deer being scouting right before your hunt, for a mature deer, unless you know where that deer is fully bedding and you can stay away from his travel route to how you think you're going to intercept him, I would not necessarily be pouncing around the day before or 2 days before in an area to see if I can figure something new out. Most of my scouting for an area is probably done in March and April, actually, when the woods is gray and you have no cover and you can see those travel routes really easy, and you can go through a swamp or something that you couldn't punch through in the season, and you can see, oh, okay, I just found his high point where he was actually betting all season, why he was hooking on me and I couldn't get in there on a northwest wind or whatever the case may be.
Especially with some late snow on the ground, that
That
makes it even easier.
absolutely, that's huge.
So
If you're in a new piece and you have to scout, you have to scout. I mean,
right,
that's part of it. You got to know, you're trying to get an idea where a funnel is, or how the deer are moving through a piece, or if they're hooking on an edge or whatever it may be. So if you have to go, you have to go. Preferably, it would not be necessarily day or before, 2 before a hunt. I want that kind of known before I'm getting in there. But
sure.
sometimes you just got to make it work, especially go out state and you only have a week to get it done or something like that. You got to get it. You got to get in there and get eyes on it. But if I had a choice in a perfect scenario, no, I probably wouldn't go into an area that I'm necessarily going to try and knock down an old animal the day before, especially with hot temperatures and boots on the ground in an area that he may be in. But if you have to go, you got to go.
All right, cool.
So it sounds like you have a specific, excuse me, a specific hunting style. Now, is this something that you developed? Is this something that you were taught? Is this something that you've utilized specifically for the bow season? I know you said all your deer that you've shot are with the bow. Do you do any gun hunting for deer at all?
No, not for any other reason than I just love bow hunting. I got addicted to it, and I've stayed with it throughout. I have been on some, filmed some gun hunts and so forth, but I just prefer to shoot them with the bow if I can. Not to say I won't do that. I'll definitely, a muzzleloader hunt here or there, or a shotgun hunt later at some point. Not saying I wouldn't do that. Just up at this point in time, it's been all archery. Yes, it's been a style or tactics that I've learned from making mistakes, going in and setting cameras and realizing I set up on a trail that a deer was using, and then I went and scouted, and all of a sudden the deer stopped using that trail. Simple things like that to translate it into, okay, I can't do that again. I got to wait for a certain wind or wait right before a rain, so it's going to push my scent out of there, or whatever the case may be. But it's all things I've done just because of making mistakes. I mean, I figure it's the best way to learn. If people are saying they're not making mistakes, then I guess you're just not learning.
Yeah. I mean, for me, my story with chasing more mature animals kind of started during COVID, right? So, I didn't get your age. How old are you?
39.
39. So me and you were pretty much the same age. So when I was younger, though, I didn't really, I was into more of the bird hunting. We kind of, went as a family on the weekends. We do some bird hunting during the season, but I was always kind of more preoccupied with, myself. I was also big into sports. I had a lot of other things going on, and I didn't really have a lot of time for hunting. When COVID came around, it kind of shifted my mentality now. Now I'm married, I've got a family to provide for. Things are uncertain, and I want to put food on the table for nothing else other than having a full fridge. So I really kind of dove into really learning how deer move, how deer transition through different terrains, and that was where my real kind of hunting story for more mature animals started. I don't really utilize, and probably to my detriment, I don't actually utilize cell cams or cameras that much. I do have some. I do go into certain areas and use them. A lot of times I focus my cameras on maybe, like you said earlier, you go in during the winter. Maybe there's some scouting that you do and you're able to see a deer that survived. I'll set cameras up on areas where I know maybe the deer survived and try to see if I can hone in on a specific deer. But we actually travel a little bit. Like he said, he's in New York. So starting this year, I've been starting to gear up to start traveling to other states. Going to be hunting New York, going to be hunting Pennsylvania. We're looking to maybe do another hunt with a buddy of ours up in the Northeast and getting to a bunch of different places. Trying to get cameras set up in every single location is it's basically impossible.
Yeah.
So kind of building on what Christopher said, where he's been doing a lot of on the ground scouting in season.
Yeah.
I've actually found a lot of success with that in the last couple of years. The difference is I don't do it and then go in the next day. I do it and set up that night. Right. So like a lot
Makes
of guys
sense.
are going in there, especially early season, like right now.
Yep.
I'll do my scouting midday.
Yep.
And then I'm hunting that night.
Makes
and then
sense.
I probably won't even go into that tree again for the rest of the season.
Absolutely.
So That just goes to show that there's a lot of different hunting styles for different people. Different people are on different progressions of their journey. We want to show people that, we're representing everybody, right? There's guys who are going to hunt mature animals, and there's also people who have just started hunting. One of the things
Yeah.
that we've said on the channel before that, I want people to, to understand is the amount of knowledge that you can gain to be a new hunter, to get to the part of my journey that I'm on now. People are going to be able to get to where I'm at now faster than I'm going to be able to get to my next level, right? So like you're saying, hunting specifically just mature animals,
Mhm.
5-year-olds. I just recently, last week, we were running low on the end of the season here, and I was able to harvest I'm guessing he's a 3.5-year-old. But that's just a fact because I don't want to get burned with a tag, right? I'd rather fill the tag. I'm in a piece where there's a high population of animals, and I'm not in an area right now hunting a specific deer. I didn't have anything located. So
Gotcha.
I'm okay with that. Plus, I also want to fill my freezer. Me and my
Yeah,
family, we pretty much only eat red meat is deer meat, right?
that's
So
amazing.
I'm trying to put as much deer meat in the freezer as I can. But again, for our viewers, you could probably get up by listening to us, by listening to other people. You can get up to our knowledge base and be able to be as good of a hunter as we are, way faster than we're going to be able to get to constantly, consistently, year after year, harvesting mature animals. I mean, that
Yeah.
takes a lot of guts. That's really cool. So we got a little bit about your background. I'm sure people who have tuned in at this point are chomping at the bit trying to get to the story. So why don't we get into now? We're going to switch over to bear hunting. How did you get into bear hunting? What made you take the leap from starting off as a waterfowl hunter to now chasing bear? And then we won't even have to ask the question after that. Why don't you just tell us a story?
So the leap would be maybe 6 or 7 years ago, with the bear hunt being pretty hot topic in New Jersey. Uh, had shot some pretty good deer. I was like, this sounds interesting. Let me see what it's all about. The first time I really dove into it was like anything else, starting off even deer hunting. Learned a lot, screwed up a lot. Figured out the animals are a little different. Now, if you're gonna, I'm not gonna say it's easy, but if you're hunting New Jersey and you can bait the smaller bears, if you're in the right area, you can get it's pretty decently easy to get a 150-pound bear to come into the area and so forth. But I started to realize that for the larger bears, even worse than deer, they just were super super canny. They did not want a daylight. They used very specific trails. They knew where trail cameras were. They only came into a bait site on some very specific winds. And the first couple of years, I never even laid eyes on big bears because I was messing it up. I didn't give them enough credit. Completely honest. I was humbled by it, and I learned a ton. Fast forward to 4 years ago, where I realized I had to change some things up and really approach it a little bit more strict that I did like I did with deer. I figured I was going to focus on some areas that I had heard that there were some bigger bears, maybe not as many bears, but bigger bears. And I passed on a ton of bears the first real season that I've really focused on 4 or 5 years ago. I just was looking for something significant. First bear I shot was around the 400 mark, which is a great bear. I was super happy with it. And then it kind of lit the fire that I wanted something bigger. That year, I had a really big bear that was very similar to the bear that I just shot this year, and he vanished on me. Once I put a little pressure on him, he just disappeared. Other guys were after him. I ended up meeting a bunch of guys that knew about that bear, and we all traded notes over a couple more years. Fast forward to about 3 years ago, where I saw this bear for the first time. And I saw him because I was scouting an area late season and way after the bear hunt of that year. And I knew it was just a giant, and I knew that it was a special bear just by the way, just by his size, and talking to some people in the neighborhood, how he was acting. He just wasn't like your typical bear. He could care less that anybody was around him. He knew he wasn't. He was a boss in the area. 2 years
Um,
ago is when I.
oh,
So
sorry. So no, sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were transitioning. My bad. Go ahead. Keep going.
2 years ago, is when I really focused on him and him alone. Went to the area that I originally saw him. Took me a couple weeks to find him. Bounced around. I ran a lot of cameras, ran about 25 cameras, trying to determine exactly what piece of property he was using, where he was living, how he was transitioning, and so forth, and got him dialed in and really thought I had him. I was completely wrong. I had him on camera every single day in daylight on the bait. I was like, it's a slam dunk. And then he made me look like a fool and vanished once again, which I had found out that he had done to multiple guys over like 6 or 7 years. And I was like, okay, now it turned into a complete obsession. During that time of the 3 or 4 weeks before the season of last year, he had jumped on me 3 times, 1,000 yards or a mile away. Every single time I put a little bit of pressure on his area. And when I say a little bit of pressure, I mean either going into bait at the wrong time, like a little later in the day when I shouldn't have been in there. It wasn't like noon, which was where I was trying to keep baiting, was in the middle of the day when I knew he really wasn't moving. Or if I walked on a trail that I knew was a major travel corridor for him too many times, and then he just shut down and just left. I kept finding him again until the last picture I got of him last year was opening morning at 6:30 in the morning, and then he disappeared until May. Never came back to the area. Got a picture of him in May, back in the same area. He only stuck around for like a week or two, and then he vanished on me again. And I was like, all right, I got a little bit of time. I got to find this thing again. Started running cameras again, jumping around, getting permission on properties, checking every, the big bears. If anyone doesn't know, they tend to like swamps. If you're hunting big timber, big open timber for big bears, I'm not going to say you're necessarily wasting your time, but you're not being as efficient as you might want to be. All the big bears I've ever found have all been in a swampy, cool, tucked in, nasty area that you don't want to be in, that a person doesn't want to be in, is where they want to be. He always lived in an area that you pretty much couldn't walk through. You had to crawl if you wanted to go in there. So found him again towards the end of the summer. And he had traveled a little over a mile, maybe a mile and a half from when I first lost him, into an area that I kind of overlooked. I'll be honest with you. I was looking at some bigger swamps and bigger areas, and he was in a small little piece that was surrounded by houses. And he never really went far from houses. He always wanted to be around the houses. He was old enough. Food sources were easy there, but the piece that he was in was tucked away enough. There was no pressure in it. People didn't go in it. There was no hikers or anything like that. So he was pretty tucked away and felt pretty confident. I found a piece that was next to it that I able to get him on the bait and get him patterned to that. Again, being the bear he wasn't stupid. He never came to the bait really consistently in daylight, other than showing up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And then he would stay on the bait for a couple hours and head back to bed, between 6:30 and 7 or 7:30 in the morning. So I knew my only shot of this was to get on, because in New Jersey, we can't hunt over bait, right? So we have to find a travel corridor that's 100 yards or more away from your bait and try and cut them off somehow. And B, even if I could hunt over bait, I don't believe I would have been able to hunt him over bait, because he never approached the bait when the wind was wrong. He never, ever came in. There was a couple winds, like a southwest wind or a southeast wind, that he couldn't get around the bait because of a road and expose himself. So those days he just didn't show up. He just would not come into it. He always waited for the correct winds. Knowing what I thought was his proper travel corridor, set up a bunch of cameras, a net of cameras on those travel corridors, and kind of narrowed down how he was traveling through them, what days he was traveling through them, what those winds were, and tried to build a pattern, which was actually doable because of the small distance he was traveling. He was only traveling maybe 300 to 400 yards from a small little swamp piece, crossing a smaller road, into a larger swamp where my bait was tucked away. And he would literally walk in the same steps. It was literally just his footprints. Once I determined that, it was more or less keep him happy, do some baiting tactics that I have figured out over the years, which we can dive into, and then basically try and figure out how I was going to get behind him once I knew he was on the bait and get up in a tree. The piece that he was coming out of, I didn't want to go in and like scout around and mess around too much and push him out of, because it was small. It really wasn't big. I think it was like an 8-acre piece, which mostly was swamp. So he was tucked in the middle of it. So I left it alone. I did not go in. I literally scouted from a roadside with binoculars, seeing where his travel corridor was into that piece of woods, picking out some trees that I could figure out that I could get into. And I knew I wasn't going to go in there and hang a set. I had to bring a climber the day that I was going to go in, which is exactly what I did. The piece that he was transitioning to, where the bait was a bigger piece, and he seemed to only stay to one side of it. He didn't want to go. I had another bait on the property that he never hit. I actually had 3 other baits surrounding him in like 400 to 500 yard increments on other properties, and he never hit them. So he stayed pretty core. So again, getting back to how we were able to cut him off, the morning of, basically saw him on baits on the same pattern that he'd always been on. Actually, wait, I jumped too forward. I didn't hunt him on Monday because it was a southwest wind. I purposely stayed out of there because I didn't think it was my best opportunity. I needed a northwest wind, and I needed a steady northwest wind to fight a thermal coming off a hillside that I didn't want to give him a chance to even catch a little swirl. So I waited. My plan was for Tuesday morning. Waited for him to hit the bait at like 3:00 in the morning. He hit the bait. He stayed on the bait. He usually would hit the bait for a little bit, disappear for an hour, and then come back around 5:00. So he hit the bait. I basically got headed into the woods around 4:00, ran into the woods in the dark, knew where his trail was, but had to set up kind of, not going to say, totally new, but I had an idea where he's traveling, but I didn't have shooting lanes. I didn't have anything like that. It was kind of like, I got to get up and I got to make this happen on how he's traveling, because I did not want to have my scent in there for weeks or times beforehand. So I got up, realized I couldn't get too high because of how thick it was. I just had to get above the ground cover, stay below the canopy, and hope for some good shooting lanes with my headlamp, which actually worked out. I set up for a 22-yard shot, which did not happen. He came in. So again, I'm jumping ahead. He hit the bait. I watched him on the bait on my camera. 6:52, which is a picture I posted on Facebook showing everybody that he was on the bait in legal time. He left. I got a picture of him walking off the bait and did exactly what he had done for weeks previously. Came on that trail, crossed the road, literally got to the road, checked both ways for traffic, went across the road. Yeah, it was pretty amazing to watch how he would move. He literally waited for cars to disappear and not hear them, and then he would cross the road. He crossed the road, came into that patch, was coming down the trail, and literally put the brakes on. And I knew the wind was perfect. I had wind hit me perfectly in the face with a 10-mile-an-hour wind. I had no swirl. Everything was perfect. They say the big ones have a sense. Well, let's just say he had a sense. So he got to about 35 yards, but totally covered. I needed him to come.
Speaking of that, we'll let you go. That when you talk about sense, the big bears having like a sixth sense or
Sense, yeah.
So I was actually watching a podcast that had to do with just people talking about stereotypes when it comes to hunting, and one of the things was they said that Indians used to say that when you're hunting bears, when you can start to see them, that they would sweet talk them into coming closer to them because they knew that they had a sense. So it's funny that you say that, because it goes in line with ancient people who have been hunting animals in this country for thousands of years. They always said that those big mature bears, you have to sweet talk them to bring them in that last little bit, because they have
Wish I would have known that. That would have been great to know. I would have tried. but yeah, next time. He put the brakes on me at 35 yards, and he was totally covered. I didn't have a shot. I needed him to clear another 10 yards to get into a lane, and he just made a 90-degree turn and started walking away from me. Again, I know he did not win me, and I did not walk on his trail. And I was upwind, or sometimes I was downwind of his trail when I entered that patch of woods specifically, so that I wouldn't have any crossover. But he started to hook and then started to just angle a little bit at like the 40-yard mark, and gave me, I had two windows to shoot through, one at 45, another one at 55. He got to the 45 and actually stopped. I didn't want to stop him and spook him. He stopped himself, and I was able to just lean back a little bit, settle in, and let it rip at 45, and it found its mark. He crossed the road and ran up to a rock bluff about 100 yards away, bedded up. The blood trail was ridiculous. I mean, it wasn't hard to follow. We could just walk it. But I was a little surprised that when we got up to him, He was still alive. This was probably 6 or 7 minutes afterwards. I found out that I took out one lung and cut the second lung. I didn't punch both of them. Again, this is a situation where I've been hunting forever, and a 900-pound animal that I thought I put a 10 ring on, I didn't get the penetration that I fully wanted. I found out later there's 9 inches of fat on his side, and it just was insanity. But he would have died, but for the choice of being ethical, we put another arrow in right there. He went another 20 yards, 30 yards, and died right away and expired. But it was surprising to me. I wish I would have gotten a 22-yard shot and he would have followed that trail. I'll never understand to the day I die why he just turned and walked away. I'll never be able to figure it out. It's literally
because, right?
Just because.
That would have been exactly how we drew it up, and it never ends up being how you drew it up.
That's true.
If you would have set it up for a 45-yard shot, he would have walked into 22.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I got a couple of questions that I kind of want to touch on from within that story. But before we get into that, you had this bear that you've been chasing for 4 years. He beat you every step of the way for 3 years straight. Every step of the way, he was 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. Describe the emotion, the thoughts going through your head when you actually see this plan, the script starting to play out. He hits the food the first time. Now he hits the food the second time. Now he hits the trail that you know he's going to walk. Like, walk us through the just raw emotion that you have going on.
Each one of those markers that you just said, I figured something was going to go wrong. I knew there was doubt. I figured he wasn't going to, either he was going to get to across the road and just not come in, or the night before I was like, watch, it's been 6 weeks. I've had him pattern. He's just not going to show up anymore. There's been doubt the whole way. Again, hunting an animal like that was incredibly humbling. I learned a ton from it. Smartest animal I ever chased. So there was doubt at every single step of the way until I walked up on him and put my hands on him. There was even when I shot him, even when he walked in and I shot him and I knew that the shot was really good. I mean, I went to the fletching. I saw the blood coming out of him. I knew the animal was dead. Even then, even though I had him on my camera, I was like, was that the right bear? Like, that was the right bear. There was always doubt with that bear. Like, I never really, as much as I wanted to believe it was going to happen, as much as I put the time in and hundreds of hours and knocking on doors and crazy amount of hours running bait. My fiance thought I was absolutely nuts running hundreds and, literally thousands of pounds of bait. I never really fully believed it was going to happen because he had kept beating me every single time. And not just me, he beat a lot of guys. And there was another group of guys that were after him as well that were on a neighboring property. That's probably a podcast in itself. But
sure.
Until I got my hands on him, there was doubt every single step of the way. So yeah, it was definitely an emotional roller coaster, positive, negative. It was just up and down until I actually had him in my hands.
Sure. And that level of doubt that you have, even though you planned, you prepped, you studied this deer, you went in with a plan, and that level of doubt just serves to the level of respect that we as hunters have for these animals, and understanding that they're better than us. Yeah. We just have to catch them slipping up. And it's just amazing to hear those stories and those things kind of coming together. So
absolutely.
We thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, that's great. You said you walked in using a climber, and I'm curious to know, do you still use like a summit climber or like a legitimate climber setup? Because at one point you said you leaned back into your shot, which makes it sound like you're using a saddle. So I'm just kind of curious what setup, like what you're using to hunt.
Wasn't using a saddle. Have not dived into the saddle game yet. May do that soon. I was using a lone wolf hand climber, and what I meant by that statement is I actually had to crouch down and lean back on the tree to catch the window that I needed to get that shot. Because again, I had not picked out that tree beforehand. It was literally going in there at 4:00. I knew I had about 30 minutes to look at trees, try and pick out shooting lanes in the dark, because I didn't want to be in there beforehand. Because every time I tried to scout that bear before or get in an area that he was being in, he just kind of vanished on me. I did not want that to happen. So yeah, leaning back, I literally was, Cirque du Soleil, leaning back and contorting my body, trying to get that shot off enough to get through that whatever window it was. It wasn't crazy small. It wasn't like a 2-inch window, but it was a 12-inch window between some saplings to get a clean shot that I knew was right there. And it was plenty bright out. He came in after 7:00, which was an absolute blessing. because if it was darker, I might have had a little trouble. But yeah, that's where it happened. It was a lone wolf climber that I have used many, many, many times before, but I haven't dove into the saddle game yet.
Okay,
Talk to us a
cool.
little bit about your setup that you're using, your bow, your arrows. What you're using single bevel, using expandable. What are you using
Yep.
in your setup?
So bow is an older bow. It's a Hoyt Vector Turbo, and it's just been my baby. I've shot a lot of the newer bows. They're awesome. I just haven't found one that I love more. It's still a 350 feet per second bow. It's fast enough. It's great. It's super quiet. I've had a lot of luck with it, so I'm not changing until I have to. Um, the arrow setup is a Victory Extortion, the stainless steel ribbon arrow. It's a lot heavier. It's a 535 grain arrow setup with a 100 grain tip. I'm using the Sever 2.0 expandable broadhead, and I took a bull elk with it, and it blew through. I've shot a lot of deer with it, and I knew it was going to be heavy enough for this job. It did a great job. It made incredible penetration right to the fletchings. I did not get a clear pass through, which again, once I got my hands on the animal, I kind of not surprised he had 9 inches of fat on either side of his body, plus everything else. But it's a heavy setup, and it did the job. I mean, the blood trail was pretty epic.
That's awesome. I've heard good things about the Severs.
Yeah.
We've talked in the past kind of about our setups, and if I was going to shoot a mechanical, I think the Severs would be the way I would go, simply because of their design and the way they swivel. We can leave it at that for now.
Yeah.
I would love to talk setups and stuff like that.
I'm shooting a heavy arrow too. How did you get onto that? I don't want to say bandwagon, even though it has caught more popularity lately. But
Yeah.
what drove you to kind of get into a heavier arrow build, as opposed to? Is it just because of the game that you're chasing and knowing that you're going to need something bigger, heavier, something that hits harder, or is this something that you use across all platforms, chasing whitetails, elk, and bear?
Yeah, I transitioned probably about 5 years ago. When I first started off, it was, get the lightest arrow, get your pin groups tight, and you can shoot one pin out to 35 yards, or as many guys will say. That's great, awesome. As I started chasing larger deer, I didn't want to play the game of worrying about either getting close to a shoulder, or I started having to take some longer shots. Actually, I had to take some 40s and 50s on some bigger deer, just where I had to set up on them so they wouldn't win me. And I started realizing I needed some of that kinetic energy. I needed some heft down range, and it made a big difference. I was getting clean pass throughs at 50 yards, which was a huge confidence builder for me. I use a single pin, and I don't care about my pin gap, more or less. So I'm picking my yardages pretty carefully. I'm constantly ranging 3, 4, 5 times as that animal's moving to get my exact setup. And I'm okay with that little bit of drop or whatever it's going to be on a heavy arrow, which if you're going to have a heavy arrow, you got to be constant. You got to be really aware of that, because you start shooting, past 50, 60 yards, the drop is significant. I mean, it could be quite large, but I prefer the penetration over having necessarily a smaller pin gap. It just, to me, that's just better. Just works out better for me. It gives me more confidence. And like anything else we do, if you got confidence in the wood, it helps you out. But that's how I got into it. And I keep it across the whole platform. If I'm going after deer, going after elk, going after bear, that setup has worked for everything.
Now I know you mentioned it. You said 500 and change. What was the weight of your arrow?
535.
535. So, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, right about the time you started, I kind of got into the heavier arrows as well. Love the way they hit. They did fly nicely, and since then I've kind of started to tone it back just a little bit. But I like to think I'm in the middle. I shoot anywhere from like a 415 to a 470 grain arrow. But I'm just like you. I like to shoot one arrow and shoot that all the time. Indoor season, outdoor season, 3D, deer, whatever I'm hunting. I want to know exactly how my arrow is going to behave in every single condition, no matter what. So I find that one arrow I like, and that's kind of what I like to run with.
Yep.
And it gives you the confidence,
Yeah, the confidence is big. And the one other thing that I've learned that is a big pro for a little heavier setup is it's quieter. It quiets your bow down a little bit. I've had some argument with buddies. We're out shooting, and they're like, "No, it doesn't." I'm like, "All right, let's pick out who's got the lightest arrow. I'll shoot my arrow. and let's see who's now. Of course, bows come into that. I mean, not everybody's bow is quieter. Some bows are going to be louder than others. But as a general rule, it has definitely been a quieter setup for me as total, which is great because you're with a bow, no matter how fast your bow is, you're not going to be faster than the speed of sound, right? It's not a bullet, so quieter is better always.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense almost from like a scientific standpoint, right? Like the more energy, a heavier arrow is going to take a little bit more energy to get moving off the
Yes.
string. So
Yep.
the arrow is going to absorb more energy, and that that absorbs some of that sound that you're hearing from the bow. So
Yeah, I
I
mean, you can see it.
100% believe in that.
So, a couple
Yep.
things I'll touch on is you said, you had a little bit of doubt after you shot. I just recently shot that buck that I told you about. It was a couple. Actually, what's funny is you said you were waiting for a northwest wind. I needed a northwest wind in order to hunt these deer that I was chasing, and we had like a 6 days in a row. It was northwest. Was that the same near you when you were watching? But that was like a week before Bears opener. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Were you having that same weather pattern, and were you saying, "I really hope this wind doesn't change on me"? Because we had like
Absolutely.
6 days in a row. It was a
Yep.
northwest wind
Yes, we
and
did. And
steady, it
and
was
he was
steady
patterned
northwest.
beautifully to it. And then I saw the weather switching for that Monday to a southwest, and I was like, oh, of course, we're gonna have a week of all northwest, and then that one day is just gonna screw me. But I
Well,
knew I couldn't even
so
risk
that's
it.
funny. So that could be, now that we're thinking about things, that could be something that may have worked in your favor, because he may not have had those steady conditions the same. That could have been something that he says, you know what, that Monday, maybe there's a weather pattern that comes in and it triggers him and says, okay, time to go till May. And
Yeah,
and we just had that extra day of
yeah,
northwest wind, and he hung for one more day. Otherwise, he could have been gone till spring. So,
very
you know,
possible. I'll take it.
it's,
I'll take any
yeah,
amount of luck as I can get.
See,
exactly. But
and I ran into something kind of similar. We're chasing this buck we call Post, and like I said, we had the shot at him. We didn't get him, but I ended up going out. We had him every single day on camera. Southwest wind, southwest wind. Then it switched to northwest, 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 northwest. He was in every single day, and then it switched to southwest. He was in again. But I noticed with him, it had to be under 8 mile an hour wind. It didn't really matter with the direction, but it had to be under 8 mile an hour. It couldn't be too hot. It couldn't. He was coming around as long as it was 65 or under. But he never showed up 5 days in a row. Never once did he show up 5 days in a row. He'd show up 2 days, 3 days, four
Yep.
days, and that fifth day, always he wouldn't show. And the first day I got to sit at him was the fifth day.
Yeah.
And my dad was going to sit the same spot the next day. We have like a shed that we've converted into a blind up there.
Mhm.
So I was going to sit a tree. He was going to go sit the blind. And I knew that if I was going to try to get a shot at him, I had to try to slip in there the day before. So
Got
the
it.
fifth day, I sat. He didn't show up. The sixth day, he comes back. I've never had a deer this pattern in my entire life. So it was just so cool to see an animal that was so mature and these like almost to see the other side of it, right? Like we always talk about how these mature deer are hard to hunt. They're really smart, and
Yep.
they don't slip up. But then I had this deer that we've put at 5.5, 6.5 years that was so patterned you'd think he was 1 year old.
Huh.
So it was like you saw the other side of it, and it's like,
Yeah.
what more could you want? First
yeah,
day
Yep.
but we've
sitting,
also seen what's
you
happened
know.
since then. Now that you've given
Oh
him the
my god,
information,
he's
he's
gone.
gone.
He's gone, and
And we've
every other
got,
deer is
yeah,
gone.
everyone's calling us, hey, guess what? Your deer's here.
Yeah. And here's my philosophy. I was just listening to a podcast this morning where the guys were talking about so much about mature deer is unknown. Like we don't know a lot about older deer. There's not a shit ton of research out there. So a lot of that stuff is anecdotal. Make an assumption, make a hypothesis or a theory, get out in the woods and test it. Right? So what I'm thinking is it's kind of crazy how all of a sudden same day all the deer disappear. So what I think happened is, knowing that deer have that interdigital gland, and they secrete sense, calm sense or non-calm sense, under distress.
Yep.
I think what happened is all these deer know that he's the mature deer in the area, and if he's scared and running off, they know something's not right. That's
Interesting. Yeah.
my assumption.
Definitely.
We have some food plots. We still have apples on the property. There's no reason why the deer shouldn't be coming through. They're just not there. Not even
There's not there. Wow.
and the only deer we're seeing, the only bucks we're seeing are new bucks. Granted, they're younger, but they're ones we haven't seen all summer. So
Gotcha.
I think the ones that were there knew something was up. They shifted out, and these new guys are shifting in, not knowing something's up.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
That's my theory. You mentioned at one point, and this is what I apologize for cutting you off earlier, but this is what I was trying to get at in the moment. Was you said that there were a lot of mistakes or things that you noticed or mistakes you were making along the way, and you had to correct those mistakes in order to begin finding success on these bears. What are some of those mistakes that you were making, and what are those changes you made? Like I know you said that you started to notice you were baiting at the wrong time, so you started adjusting when you were baiting. Like, what are some
Yep.
other mistakes and changes you made to find the success?
Okay, so I'll start with location. I know I touched on, where I was finding some of the bigger bears. Early on, I was picking big tracts of land, big tracts of timber, and thinking, oh, this is great. There's 700 acres here. It's going to be loaded with bears. I'm going to have bait out here, massive pile of bait. I'll be covered up. I got bears, but I got little bears and I got transient bears, and I didn't get the big boys that I was looking for because they just weren't moving through those pieces. I might get a picture or two of them in the middle of the night because they were just cruising from maybe swamp to swamp and they just cut through there, but I never got them to hang up in there. So that was, and I spent a lot of time baiting some big tracts of land, and through making mistakes, I figured out, okay, I'm wasting time here. I'm wasting bait. I got to change it up. That was probably the biggest lesson to begin with. Number two was how I was baiting and time of baiting. I tried to keep the baiting schedule very routine. So middle of the day, go in. I didn't care about making noise and so forth. That didn't seem to matter. But keeping the time the same really seemed to help. If I was going in early mornings and late in the evenings, so forth, you could see their patterns would change. But if I kind of kept it to the middle of the day, it really kept them pretty regular. A couple times, earlier on when I was hunting smaller bears, if you will, there would be bears that would be, sometimes you get to your barrel or not, and the little bears would be there. They don't care. They'll run out 20 yards and you can fill up your barrel, and they'll sit there and look at you and coming back on your barrel. That's
Sure.
not the bears I was really worried about, right? I was looking for the big guys. Those big guys are the ones that the patterns would change if I would show up at 4:30. If I couldn't get out to bait, I realized I'm better off not baiting that afternoon, going in the next day at the correct time, than pushing that bear off his pattern. Mistakes that you got to make and figure out. Number three is type of bait. A lot of guys that are baiting bears sometimes get stuck on a kind of bait that they want to use, or maybe they can only get to it. If you're going to chase a big bear or a lot of big bears, you need to have a serious supply of bait. I mean, I went through close to 5,000 pounds of bait in a month running different areas. Yeah, there's some pretty good amount of money boiled into it. I don't, if you guys know Kelsey Burgess, who's a bear bait supplier here in New Jersey. He gets big bulk baits. He was one of the main proponent for me getting the baits I need. But I was buying, 1,200 pounds of special trail mixes multiple times, and that's what was keeping up my small bait. But what I was saying about different kind of baits is I'd have big baits, which is like a lot of guys using donuts you hear about, right, or apples or any kind of large big baits, which is great. The bears love them, but they don't last. You could fill up a 55-gallon barrel full of big baits, and if you have a couple big bears in that area, they'll wipe it out in 24 hours, and it's not efficient. So you have to have a mixture of big baits and then small baits, like the trail mix that we were using. Help that bait last longer, meant I didn't have to go and bait as much. And I was running a lot of different baits in different areas, so I was baiting every day, but I didn't have to necessarily go back to that one bait every day. I could go back every other day or so forth, and watching my camera how it would get hit by different bears. But here's the biggest lesson by far, is bears get picky, the big bears. And if you don't keep your bait sites fresh, they get annoyed. And it sounds ridiculous, but I had found multiple times that if a site got, if they was using big bait and they pulled a lot of donuts or something out of that barrel, or they had a lot of trail mix out that had cookies and crumbles in it, and all of a sudden we got a big rain and that site turned into a mush, just gross pile of just nastiness, they backed out. They didn't come back for a couple days. Their pattern changed a little bit. So it was a big point to just keep that. Now, we were lucky this season. We haven't had a lot of rain at all. But over the years, I had seen that. So I had to constantly go in there, keep the site fresh, pulling out garbage bags full of mushy, bait that hasn't been touched. That's what a lot of guys won't do. And the big guys don't want to do it because they don't want to sit in that mush. They're going to sit down and lay in the bait. I have hundreds of pictures of a lot of big bears that will lay down. And if it's a nasty area, they're not going to lay in it. They're not going to enjoy it. It will change their pattern. I know it sounds ridiculous. It really does. And I've had people say, you're crazy. And then I show them pictures. I'm like, he's not going to lay in it. You'll see him. He'll be off camera off a little bit and sticking his arm up around the barrel because he doesn't want to lay in that pile of crap. That was a big thing that I learned. And number 2 is getting your bait in an area that necessarily isn't a great spot for you to hunt the bear, but makes the bear really comfortable. Where I had this bear on bait was in some nasty, thick spot. I knew I wasn't going to hunt him there, but he felt comfortable in there. He would go in there and lay down for hours at a time and not have any issues. A lot of guys necessarily pick the spot, and it was a pain in the butt. I had to, it wasn't the easiest spot to get to. A lot of guys are going to pick a bait spot that is easy to get to because it's easy for them to drag in or drive in or whatever. But that doesn't mean the bear is going to like to be there.
Sure. And I'm assuming wherever you're putting this bait to, you want to not put it too close to where you believe he's bedding, because you want to force him to kind of transition there. We want to be mindful of your time. Angelo, let me know that you have some stuff going on over on your end. But you mentioned at one point, just real quick, you said that you were after you got a lot of little bears, but you were after bigger bear, right? Were you after this specific bear, or if another bear that you saw come out was big enough, would you have shot that bear?
I was after this specific bear. Like, I knew this was the bear. He had a big scar down his leg. He was very identifiable. He had a little bit of a limp. So there was no question that this was the bear I was after for multiple years. So I was after him. I knew that there was other guys that were after him. So if he were to be shot, I had some other bears that we had in reserve that I would have been very happy to take. I mean, our crew of guys shot a couple 500s and 600s the same week. So we had some good bears that were also taken alongside of him. But he was my full focus until I knew either I got him or someone else had gotten him. I wasn't going anywhere else.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And that's how I feel about, Post, the guy I'm hunting here.
Yeah.
And just last, if you could just give us a number. I know we have it listed here as a 900-pound bear, and that's kind of like what's been going around. But what was the exact number? When you weighed that bear, what was the exact number, the weight on that bear?
So he was weighed gutted, which was 770. That's the weight of him gutted. But the state gives you for an allocation of guts, it's somewhere between 16 and 18% add for the guts, which puts him between 880 and 912.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Dude.
It's a big animal.
Well, congratulations, man. And
I appreciate it.
Thanks for sharing your story with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And I was saying the last little bit is that, the bear, a lot of questions I'm getting and a lot of hate that I'm getting. We won't get too crazy about that. But the bears, obviously I had a choice to either gut him or not gut him. And I knew once we got up to him, we knew he was, ridiculous. If you bear hunt long enough, you know that you have to get them gutted quickly. Otherwise they'll spoil pretty fast. You got an hour or two tops and they're going to start turning. So because I gutted him, they're probably not going to give me the world record, even though I have it by over 100 pounds.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm waiting to hear. And again, world record for weight. Obviously, Boone and Crockett is by skull and so forth. But right now, the world record is 780 intact. My bear is 770 gutted.
Intact? They have to give it to you.
I told them
the gallbladder alone weighs 10 pounds.
I told them they could give me 10% and, at 850 or whatever. But
come on.
We'll see. Again, there's a choice I'd make again right away. I knew I made the choice right away. That my couple buddies were like, let's just get it in whole. I was like, as soon as we get to that check station, because you got to bring all your Jersey bears to a check station, I knew it was going to be chaos and I probably wouldn't get him back to getting gutted right away and so forth. So we got him out. We got him gutted and he cleaned off and got his chest cavity open and we saved all the meat. I'm actually picking it up tomorrow. And we donated all the fats being made into soap and candles and some good stuff, but it's all being used.
That's great. We love that.
That's awesome. Yeah, we do a lot of things to try to help people here as well. One of the clubs that I'm in, and we start off the season everybody in the club, their first deer gets donated to Hunters Helping the Hungry. Is something that we
Great.
pride ourselves on. We do that to kind of help people out.
That's awesome.
You know, there's a lot of hard times falling on people right now, and anything that we can do to help people out is something that
So
we want to do.
that's great.
So again, Brian, thank you so much for your time. We're so
Yeah.
happy to have had you on and to be able to hear your story. Go ahead and plug quickly where people can find you, whether it's your socials or talk about the channel that you guys are going to be coming out with, where they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so about 6 weeks ago, we launched a social media channel. It's gonna be a production channel or social media presence. It's called Timber Life Outdoors. It's on Facebook. It's on Instagram as well. We're gonna have a YouTube channel up shortly. Like I said, I've been filming. Just dumped about 15,000 into camera gear, so we'll be running a lot of cameras and running a lot of films here recently. I have a bunch of turkey hunts that are coming up and a lot of waterfowl stuff that's going to be up there. I have another bear hunt that I filmed a buddy last week as well that'll be up there, and a couple deer hunts. So we'll start putting them up there, and hopefully everybody will like them. But it's Timber Life Outdoors, again, on Facebook and on Instagram. The YouTube channel is not launched yet, but it will be up there probably the next month.
Oh, it's awesome. Can't wait to see that. Can't wait to see if we can collaborate with you in the future. We'd be really looking forward to doing something. I know
Appreciate it.
I'm definitely looking into getting into some upland bird hunting. Christopher's actually got himself a very nice bear on his property. I'm sure he'd be
Awesome.
willing to pick your brain. I don't know if he's waiting to get in on there, but I'll tell you, if he shows you the picture, I mean, his neck is like,
Bro,
and he's a big boy.
when this bear walks,
Yeah.
his belly is 1 inch off the ground.
He's a big
That's
boy.
awesome, man.
It's
Yeah.
just sagging and rocking back and forth.
He's
So
a big
love
boy,
it.
and
I
again,
love it.
same thing like you said. He likes staying close to the houses. He likes to
Yeah.
pull the trash out of people's garbages and bring them onto Christopher's property and
Ah,
just hang out there. He does it mostly in the dark, but you got to see if we can get him in the daylight.
yeah,
Anyway, thanks
definitely.
everybody for tuning in. Obviously, we can be found on the Sportsman's Empire Podcast Network. We can also be found on Apple Podcasts. If you could please leave us a 5-star review and a written review. Also on Spotify, if you could leave us a 5-star review, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks again to Brian for coming on, and we've got a lot of content coming to you guys for the rest of the season. Check him out and his channel as soon as they start dropping some content. It's going to be really good stuff. We'll hope to have you on again in the future. Hopefully it's
Love
more
to.
success stories for you. Good luck to you for the rest of the hunting season. And just remember, everybody, success is just a commitment away.
we're
Thanks,
going,
guys.
guys.